Sometimes if you're facing the screen, the glare becomes difficult. Lately, I've got to change the lighting, and I think it's a little better today. Well, have you ever heard of, what about this? You start talking to a guy about Jesus and Him crucified and the gospel. And he goes, well, what about this? Well, that happened to me, a 3 weeks back. He says, you got it wrong. Lucifer was a man. What has that got to do with the gospel? Who cares, But what's your duty? Answer the question. But put the other things more important first. So now we're back to Isaiah chapter 14. And who is Lucifer? And Isaiah chapter 14. 1 to 32. Let's skip on down to the explanation. It shifts context a number of times. And if you cherry pick, guess what you're going to come up with? Wrong information. So, verses 1 to 8, we'll read those next. The Lord will still have mercy on His people Israel. He will settle them in their own land. Those that held them captive will now be their servants. The day of the Lord will come, giving Israel rest from pain and turmoil and from enslavement. In that day there will be lifted up a proverb against the oppressor, the king of Babylon, the epitome of all oppressors. Get that. For he will have ceased, and his attack will have ceased. The Lord will have broken the staff of the wicked, the scepter of the rulers, and the one who subdued the nations in anger with unrestrained persecution. The whole earth will have been at rest and quiet. The people of the earth, even the trees, will have rejoiced over the king's death. Sounds like the millennial rule? Has this been corroborated in other passages in the Bible? You bet. Well, Isaiah 14:1, the Lord will have mercy on Jacob, Israel, and will still have chosen Israel, and He will have settled them in their own land. The new covenant, right? Jeremiah 31, the resident alien will have joined himself with them, and he will have attached himself to the house of Jacob. And peoples will have taken them and will have brought them to their place. And the house of Judah will have possessed them for manservants and maidservants in the land of the Lord, and they will have been captors of their captors, and will have ruled over their oppressors. And it will have come to pass on the day of the Lord, that the Lord, giving you, Israel, rest from your pain and turmoil, and from forced labor in which you have been enslaved. Moving on, and you will have lifted up this proverb against the king of Babylon, and you will have said, how the oppressor has ceased, how the attack has ceased. The Lord has broken the staff of the wicked, the scepter of the rulers, the one which strikes people with wrath, with unceasing strokes, the one which subdued the nations in anger with unrestrained persecution. The whole earth will have been at rest and quiet. They, the people of all the earth, will have been glad with shouts of joy. Even the cypress trees will have rejoiced over you, singular, referring to Babylon's king, rejoicing over his death, and the cedars of Lebanon. See, this is a particular historical thing that the Bible is referring to, and it's the epitome of those way the people of Israel were treated. Since you have been lain down, no tree cutter comes against us. So, chapter 14 begins with a statement that the Lord will still have mercy on Jacob, Israel, a term which refers to all 12 tribes of Israel. The Hebrew word transliterated kai, which has no English equivalent, appears as the first Hebrew word in verse 1 in order to make the message emphatic. And the Hebrew word orach, rendered still in the New King James Version, implies a continuing action of the Lord in having mercy upon Israel and choosing to settle her in her own land despite her unfaithfulness. This adds to the emphatic message, which has been so often repeated by Isaiah as an encouragement to those of Judah who would listen in earnest, the remnant of believers. They're in captivity in Babylon. This is the focus of Isaiah. So the Lord will still settle his people in their own land, in the land of the Lord, implying security, peace, and rest. Note that Isaiah's foretelling of the fall of Babylon and of other nations which have and will oppress Israel would assure God's people that he would work on their behalf. In verse 1, the Hebrew word transliterated hagar, rendered resident alien, refers to a person without land or clan ties, consequently without traditional tribal legal support or protection. Hence, he is vulnerable to abuse and enslavement. being neither slave, citizen, nor foreigner. They were once Israel's oppressors, but in this future time, yet future, they will choose to join themselves with the Israelites as their servants. Hence Israel will now rule over her oppressors in the land of the Lord. Verses 1 to 3 portray the people of Israel settled in their own land, the land of the Lord, in a future day characterized with lasting rest from the pain and turmoil and the forced labor to which she had been enslaved throughout much of her history. So far, this has not occurred, and it evidently will not occur until the Lord himself puts down all oppression throughout the world and then establishes his eternal kingdom rule. See, this is the focus, yet future, the continuing theme of chapters 1 to 13 and beyond. So the prophecy in chapter 13 did not occur in the time of Nebuchadnezzar, as some contend. Similar, but not the same, although Nebuchadnezzar would settle the Jews in Babylonia, and did put them through such pain and hard labor as the other oppressors did, the Israelites did not settle in the land of the Lord to finally live in lasting peace, security, and rest with their oppressors as their servants. So that wouldn't be a fulfillment in view here. The time frame of the events portrayed in the taunting proverb in chapter 14 is the future Israel, who will taunt the king of Babylon of the future, who will have been the epitome of the evil rulers of history. So we have yet to see how bad the old Nebuchadnezzar was not too kind. Cyrus took Israel away from Babylon, but then we have a yet future king of Babylon, who will be the epitome of the evil rulers of history. He will have oppressed and persecuted the nations of the world and the people of God to a greater extent than any other ruler of the past. Even Hitler, communism, and all these other rulers pale in comparison to this ruler. He would cause worldwide destruction. In that future time, the king will meet his demise, signaling the commencement of lasting peace and rest in peace for Israel and the land of the Lord. How the oppressor has ceased, how the attack has ceased. Since the staff and the scepter are symbols of the authority and power of the rulers of the world, then the declaration in verses 5 and 6, the Lord has broken the staff of the wicked, the scepter of the rulers, the one which strikes people with wrath, with unceasing strokes, the one which subdues the nations in anger and unrestrained persecution, signifies that the Lord will bring an end to oppression and evil, pointing to the time of the end when the Lord would come to establish his kingdom. Isaiah 2, 1 to 22, 13, 6 to 13. So the whole earth will have been at rest and quiet. They, the people of all the earth, will have been glad with shouts of joy. Even cypress trees will have rejoiced over you, singular, referring to Babylon's king rejoicing over his death, and the cedars of Lebanon. Since you have lain down, no tree cutter comes up against us. Note that the rulers of the world would strip the forests of wood for their own purposes, such as to build monuments to glorify themselves. So the word should be Marbea, deriving from the Hebrew rabba, to act insolently or to act arrogantly or to attack. This refers to the king of Babylon, the future. This feminine noun that means attack. The Dead Sea Scrolls corroborates this. So note that the entire earth is in view, not just an empire in one part of the world, but all the peoples of the world, all mankind are in view. The whole earth will have been at rest and quiet, in view of the complete absence of fulfillment of worldwide and permanent peace. And with such a king of Babylon, who is implied will be the epitome of all oppressors, the one which strikes people with wrath, with unceasing strokes, the one which subdued the nations in anger with unrestrained persecution, it must be concluded that this king is from the future generation, which leads up to the time when the Lord will settle his people in their own land and put down oppression throughout the world. Some contend otherwise, but Babylon of the past is not this in view here. It cannot be referred to one of the kings from ancient days, millennia ago, whose domains were not worldwide with unconquered and or tribute-paying peoples of their borders. So this is the first mistake most people who read this passage conclude. Then they try to editorialize it even further. In verses 9 to 11, Isaiah's taunting proverb portrays a figurative scene in Sheol. Oh, 9 to 11. See, it shifts now. Beware of the context change. A song of contempt about the king of Babylon of the future, when he will have met death, and his spirit will enter Sheol. He is the one who will have oppressed the whole world with unrestrained persecution without equal. The dead spirits of the leaders of the earth will rise from their thrones to meet him. They will say to him, "You have become weak, as we are. Your pomp has been brought down to Sheol. maggots and worms cover your body in an open grave. Okay. Just read these verses. Sheol from beneath has trembled over you, the dead king of Babylon, to meet your arrival. It has roused for you the dead spirits of the dead leaders of the earth. It has commanded them to rise from the thrones, all the kings of the nations. They will all respond. They will say to you, you also have become weak as we are. You have become like us. Your pomp has been brought down to Sheol. The sound of your stringed instruments, harps, maggots are spread under you, and worms are covering your body. So, Isaiah's proverb, a taunting song, portrays a figurative scene in Sheol, place of the afterlife, not the grave, which, Kevar is the grave, which shows contempt for the king of Babylon of the future, which he will have met death, the one who will have oppressed the whole world with unrestrained persecution without equal. The Hebrew word Sheol, incorrectly rendered hell or grave, in the New King James Version and King James Version, and other versions, actually refers to it's a mistranslation, actually refers to the place of conscious life after physical death, which location has been stipulated as a place, a pit, in the center of the earth. In this proverb, the spirits, Rephaim, of the dead leaders of the earth are depicted in a great throne room in Sheol. This figurative scenario portrays each spirit being aware of and able to communicate with one another at the arrival of the dead spirit of the king of Babylon. In reality, there is no such awareness, communication, thrones, etc. in Sheol. This is figurative. Making a point, though, a literal point. But the point, there you go, the point of the proverb is to portray the destiny of the king of Babylon through the taunting of the dead spirits of the evil rulers of the world in Sheol. So the kings whom the king of Babylon of the future will have oppressed and persecuted will have taunted him about his weakness now when his dead spirit arrives in Sheol. The taunt portrays that the king's pomp, power, and glory would be reduced to abject, impotent weakness, and his physical body, evidently having been buried ignominiously in a common mass grave instead of a regal tomb above the ground, would be covered with maggots and worms. Sheol from beneath has trembled over you, referring to the dead king of Babylon, to meet your arrival, and has roused for you the dead spirits of the dead leaders of the earth. So we have a yet future ruler. It's going to be unbelievable. It has commanded them to rise from their thrones, all the kings of the nations. They will all respond. They will say to you, you also have become weak as we are. You have become like us. Your pomp has been brought down to Sheol as the sound of your stringed instruments and harps. Maggots are spread under you, and worms are covering you. So we have, now if you read this correctly, you'll get an ongoing context that's going to switch. The subject switches now to the fall of the rebellious angelic being from heaven to be cut down by the Lord to earth. This being was evidently instrumental in the king of Babylon's cruel oppression of the rulers and the peoples of the earth. How do you think this king of Babylon, mortal king of Babylon, got all his power over the whole world? Through the angelic being. He is described as the star of the morning and the son of the dawn and the one who weakens the nations, evidently through the king of Babylon, among others. For this star of the morning, he has said in his heart, I will ascend to heaven. This is not that king of Babylon. He's not a man. This is an angelic being. This angelic being says, I will ascend to heaven. I will raise my throne above the stars of God, and I will sit on the mount of assembly in the remotest part of the north, heaven, referring to the throne of the Lord in his holy mountain, and I will ascend above the height of the clouds. I will make myself like the Most High. Switching context. Be aware. So, we're looking at those points. Isaiah 14:6, the one which strikes people with wrath, with unceasing strokes, the one which subdued the nations in anger, with unrestrained persecution. And we jump to 12. How you have fallen from heaven, O star of the morning, son of the dawn. Switched context, you get it? You have been cut down to the earth, the one who weakens the nations. But you have said in your heart, I will ascend to heaven, I will raise my throne above the stars of God, I will sit on the mount of assembly in the remotest parts of the north. I will ascend above the heights of the clouds, I will make myself like the Most High. So at this point in chapter 14, the subject switches from the king of Babylon to the fall of the rebellious angelic being from heaven to earth, who was instrumental in the king's cruel oppression of those rulers and peoples of the earth. The angelic being referred to in Isaiah 14:12 is named the star of the morning and the son of the dawn. He is